Hey, welcome to Advanced. I'm doing this by video and I'm a little bit bummed about that, but at the same time I hope it can be just as profitable, if not more profitable, because I can edit it and make sure that it's streamlined. If I had to give you a goal for this track, it's basically just to improve the audio quality of your church, of your services, but I'm also excited to share a bunch of tips along the way. And I hope it's going to be challenging and helpful to you, and that it can bring you to the next level of your sound production, not only at your church but individually, whatever your context is, whether you're working with a more contemporary group or a less contemporary group. I hope this course is going to really set you up to succeed. So today, where I want to start with this is I want to start by going through some things that I think are going to be very helpful for you. And a lot of it is just basic stuff. So some of you guys might know all this stuff, but I'm going to try to get it all packed into this 1 hour, because I think if you go home and you implement these things, it's going to make a noticeable difference in the sound quality of your church right off the bat. This is also going to help you with organization, okay? So we'll just go through these, and I've got 7 listed here. The first one is organization, and I'll be brief on that. Just be organized. It's going to help you so much in the long run if you can have one, just know where things are, but also have like kind of a workflow in your sound booth. And also, I would encourage you to help bring your team along so that they know where things are. Actually, I'd encourage you, if you can, to teach your team in a way where they're going to be able to run a service on their own, even if you weren't there. It's a way that I think we can kind of pass that torch on to them and give them ownership in being on the sound team if they're able to run stuff by themselves. And I know there's a trust factor with that, especially for like high schoolers who are working with you, but I'd encourage you, if you can, to push them and move them to the point where they know where things are. The other piece of organization I want to talk about briefly is actually the organization of your soundboard. And I think this is really helpful because, first of all, it's helpful for anybody coming into your team if things make sense, if you've not got things hidden in your soundboard in a place where people aren't going to normally look. But more than that, if you can have a system in place where you know where things are, as you mix, it's going to go so much faster than if you don't, okay? So this is something that a lot of professionals recommend, to set up your board in a way where you've got like instruments together, it's clean cut, you know where things are, and when you're mixing, then it becomes intuitive. You're not even thinking about, oh wait, where did I put my bass? And that's true also when we think about recording and you're setting up your tracks in your digital audio workstation that you're going to be working with. If they can be in a certain order, every time the same order, that you know where things are, it's going to super speed up your process. And I know that from experience. So yeah, just be organized. Secondly, I want to talk about the audio chain, because we talked about this in our last session, how all these different points along the audio chain can have problems with interference, like hum and noise, especially electrical. I wanted to talk about some easy ways to get rid of interference, and I'm going to make this a homework assignment. And again, the homework in this class, it's not required. You're not like my slave, for one, and you're not my student at a college, so I can't make you do the homework. But I do think it's going to really help you if you do the homework. It's designed to be very practical to your situation at your church. So yeah, a couple ways to eliminate noise. The first one is something that most of you will know about. It's the low pass filter, okay? Now, I'm going to be talking about EQ a bunch in this class, a bunch in the second session especially, the second day, sorry. But what a low pass filter is it's just removing low end frequencies. This is super important because microphones, pickups, especially pickups on like a bass guitar, are super prone to pick up low frequencies below where you're playing. And with the bass guitar, I've noticed they actually amplify them pretty loudly. So you'll get this like really low, like punch, kind of rumble thing happening. And with microphones, what they're doing is they're actually picking up low frequency that's there in your room, but it's amplifying it, it's doubling it. So like that stuff like trucks driving by, all of your microphones are picking up the truck and then amplifying it through your system. So what does that do? Well, it's hard to perceive with your ear, but the collective result of that is that you get this massive rumble, like thunder, that's, like I said, it's hard to perceive. It's not super audible, but it's there, and that's getting in the way of your instruments. It's getting in the way of everything. Again, it's just amplifying what's happening outside and in the room. And one more thing, and I won't mention it in depth, but cables are actually also prone to pick up low frequencies, especially if it's an instrument cable and it's not balanced, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So the first thing you can do to remove noise at your church is go through every single track and carve out all of the frequencies below where those instruments are playing. I've included in your notebook a chart that has all the different frequency ranges of all the different instruments, okay? So vocals below 100 hertz, you can cut all of that. Bass guitar, you probably want to cut below like 50 maybe. Same with a kick drum. Even a kick drum, which is the very bottom end, you still want to cut below, because all that stuff is just noise. It's not doing anything for your system. The only time you'd want it is if you have a purposeful synthesizer sound that's generating like a rumble, like if you're in like a electronic music kind of thing. But I don't think most of us have that at our worship teams. So I've included that in your binder. Back to number one quick, I've also included in your binder a packet that will show you, as far as organizing your soundboard, specifically for each of you, because you guys told me what boards you have. It'll just take you to a YouTube video that will show you how to organize your board, how to change the colors of your strips, you know, get everything set up in a way that's good for you. Okay, so also for eliminating noise, phantom power. Phantom power is just a way that we back power microphones using the power that's already in the board, and that goes through the cable. The issue is most microphones don't use phantom power, only certain microphones do. And we'll be talking about that in our session on microphones, but go through and make sure that somebody hasn't gone through and like turned phantom power on a bunch of different microphones or instruments that don't use phantom power, because that's just adding a bunch of electrical signals that could cause a hum or something in the microphone itself. So that's a really easy one. The next one I would suggest is to turn off your EQ and effects. Make sure that each channel doesn't have anything on it that's, especially outboard effects, because those might be having a problem. They might have a buzz in them, right? So if you have any outboard effects, like a reverb thing, or like a tape deck where you use that to record, get that stuff off and go through your channels one by one, turn up the gain to the point where it's starting to hiss, you know, where there's a lot of gain. Don't blow your speakers out in the process, but listen for buzz. And even if it's a little buzz, and just write down every single channel on your board if there's buzz. What you'll find is that that buzz can be coming from a lot of places. It can be coming from in your board, it can be coming from in the wall. We actually, I want to show you this when you come to our church next week. We're having a problem where our backup monitors for our like piano organ players, somehow, I don't even know how this is possible, the cable that feeds that monitor that runs through our ceiling is messing with our projector screen. So we've got this cable running up in the ceiling, and this is also actually a phantom power issue because those speakers have their own power, and so the cable has electricity running back through it. The audio cable that goes to those speakers has electricity going through it, and that cable is going up in the ceiling next to the cable for our projector, and it causes this like really weird effect, like those glitching like thriller movies where it kind of shakes the screen. So we couldn't figure that out for the longest time, but a way that you can kind of troubleshoot that is going through every single channel and listening for that buzz. And like we talked about last session, a little bit of buzz that's barely audible in 4 or 5 different channels becomes audible. Or it becomes just enough where you can tell that the sound isn't clean. And even subconsciously, you can get some listening fatigue from all of that cumulative buzz. So just go through every channel, and also check your computer. If you run like tapes or CDs, check that. Just listen, turn the volume up, is really simple to do, and check to see if there's a buzz. Once you've done that, if you have players come in and plug in and there's a buzz, now you know it's either your cable, your direct box, or your actual instrument, and then you're able to take care of that. But boards have a tendency to go bad, cables, wall outlets have a tendency to go bad, and we just have to keep up on that, okay? So locate those issues. This next one is huge as far as eliminating interference, because it's a really simple fix. It's not super pricey. I noticed a difference right away when I did it on our soundboard. Digital audio is far cleaner than the auxiliary cord, headphone jack cord that we normally plug into a Mac. Also Macs, I learned this from my friend who works with karaoke stuff. Macs are just prone to having their headphone jacks buzz, again, in a slight way. If you switch over to digital audio, you will probably immediately notice the effect of that. So just a couple thoughts on that, on digital audio. There's a big difference between digital and analog, and we'll get into that a little bit more in future sessions. But digital audio, what that is it's, well, okay, let's start with analog. Analog audio is when a microphone is being moved, recording, you know, the air vibration of a sound, that's immediately turned into changes in electrical pressure, changes in voltage, and then those are being sent through your cord into your soundboard. In the traditional analog world, before digital, everything in audio was that way. It got translated from acoustical energy in the air into electrical energy. That went all the way, you know, through your cords, through your processing units, your effects racks and stuff, and then it got spit out the other side, and once it got back to your speaker, that electrical energy gets transferred back into acoustical energy in the air. So that's analog. Now what digital is, digital takes that analog signal, and either right off the bat or in a pre-box, you know, before your soundboard or in your soundboard, at some point along the line, that signal gets converted from an electrical voltage changes, you know, that are directly modeling the changes of air pressure, into a compressed digital file, like a computer file. And then that computer file is able to be read just like an analog signal is able to be read. Quantization is the name for the process where that analog signal is kind of chopped up into these little bits, where each bit represents part of the wave. And as you can see in this graph, digital audio doesn't always mean it's going to be clearer, because if you have a low quality digital audio, 16-bit, 44,000 hertz, that is your traditional CD, that's not piece by piece representing that wave fully. But if you have a higher quality audio, like a 96,000 hertz or a 24-bit, that is going to be very closely modeling that analog signal, and no perceptible difference between the straight analog signal and those bits that the computer compression has created. Digital audio is very clean, and it's especially clean when you're transferring it from your computer to your soundboard. So what you can do is you can bypass that buzz that you get from your computer cord, and it's super clean. So if you have a board that's a digital board and it has a USB connection, which I think, again, most of us have, hook it to a computer. If you don't have a computer there, get a cheap computer. Get a Mac, you know, and then when you run files for CDs, background tracks, run them through digital, because it'll be so much cleaner. You're not gonna have to worry about that buzz. This next area, number 3, is stage setup. This is also huge. What I want to just cover in this brief session here with stage setup is called isolation. isolation is the ideal, if you think about it. When we got all these band people each playing their own instrument, we want their microphone to be just picking up them. But the problem on stage, obviously, is there's a lot of bleed. Bleed is where we get somebody else's volume coming into our microphone. We just did a live worship night a little while ago. This was a huge problem, and you can't really fight it completely, but what you can do is you can guard against it. So here's a couple things to keep in mind when you're talking about bleed. First of all, try to keep, if you have vocalists and you have acoustic instruments on stage, like a acoustic guitar or a drum set, try to keep your vocalists in a different place from those instruments. Again, sometimes we don't have a lot of space, and I get that, you can't do that. But if you're able to like put your vocalists over by your electric guitar, your bass guitar, maybe by like your keyboard player, and then you put your other instruments that are acoustic instruments by each other, that's going to help. And one specific reason for that is that vocal mics are prone to pick up those bleed issues way worse than like a guitar pickup would be. So in your acoustic guitar, it can pick those bleed things up a little bit, but it's not going to be nearly as noticeable. Okay, so the worst microphones for dealing with isolation issues are condenser microphones. Those are made to pick up, you might have heard them called stage microphones, wide area microphones. There's a lot of different names, but a condenser microphone is made to pick up a larger range of area and to pick it up very evenly. They're great. The problem is they pick everything else up. So we have a flute player. I keep my flute player with their condenser mic all the way over off the stage on the right, kind of underneath the speakers that are over the stage. We have our PA system up there. I've got her in a place where she's not getting a lot of noise from the stage. The microphone's pointed away from the audience, and it's underneath the speakers, so they're not getting direct volume from the speakers either. Mostly bass, but you can cut that bass, like we talked about, with your low pass filter. Okay, so because bass a lot of times can go out the back of speakers equally as it's going out the front of speakers. Just that's the way speakers are designed. The high end comes out the front really more than it would come out the sides or the back. The bass kind of comes out all directions. So if I put her underneath the speaker, she's getting some of that bass picked up by that microphone, but I can cut it out with the low pass filter. Okay, so if you can keep your condenser mics, again, you got to think about it, because you can't perfectly do this on stage. You just you got to try as best you can. One more tip on stage positioning: the best position for a monitor is right in front of the person who is getting monitored by the monitor. We're getting, yeah, monitored, is that right? So ideally, if you have vocalists and they each have a monitor, put the monitor directly in front of them. It'll pick up less than if it's off to the side a bit, coming in from the side. Also, if you have like fills above the stage that are giving volume down, that's going to easily be picked up by your mic, and you're going to, because it's pointed right up at them, right, when you're singing, that's going to be a huge area for a feedback loop to happen, where it goes through the speaker, into the microphone, back through the speaker, into the microphone, and it amplifies really fast, and you get that loud whine. So yeah, stage positioning, and I'll include some more in your packet as well about how you can move people around on stage. One more thing that I wanted to talk about with stage setup isn't as much an isolation between people as it is an isolation of your speakers. Sound, we're going to talk about this next week with the basics class. Sound is just vibration in the air and in the walls and in the microphone, right? Sound is vibration. So anything that's like causing a vibration to happen to anything like your stage is going to be picked up as sound by your microphones. So one issue that you can eliminate that I've worked with is if you have a drum set and you have a hollow stage, every time that drummer is hitting the pedal or even hitting their drums, that vibration is going into the floor, up the poles of the microphone into the microphone. That's why if you look in a professional studio, their microphones have something called a shock mount. It's like a bunch of rubber bands in a circle. It's holding that microphone so that as the pole is vibrating, it's keeping the microphone from vibrating, and you're not getting all of that sound coming through there. And again, it's not super audible, but a little plus a little plus a little equals a lottle. Sorry. So, oh goodness, my sister's here. She just looked at me. I will cut that out for you. Just, okay, so that can happen with a drum set. It can also happen with speakers, and this is a less big deal. Some people get isolation pads to go underneath their speakers, like their sub, underneath their monitors on their stage, to keep that sound from being transferred into the stage and then going into the microphones. It's a little bit of a price point. I wouldn't suggest it unless you're like wanting a super high-end thing. For the money, I'm not sure it's worth it. So that's stage setup, which leads perfectly segue right into the next one, which is room issues. Room dynamics is huge, and we're going to talk about this more next time we get together. A large percentage of the time we have problems with audio and recording. It's not the equipment, it's the room. Probably more than half of the times that we have problems with a bad sounding recording. The bad sound is actually coming from the room, not from the microphones. And we're going to be talking about more of those things coming up here in the next class, and I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but I wanted to just go through a couple issues. The first thing we can do is what's called ringing out our room, or ringing out our microphones. You might also have heard it called EQing your room or pink noising your room. This is vital. It's a huge, it's going to hugely impact your sound. If you have not done this yet, or if it was done poorly and you do it, you're going to notice an impact immediately. And I'm going to explain how to do that in a second here. Ringing out microphones is pretty simple, so I'm going to go through that first. Similar to when you went through each of your tracks and you found those areas of buzz, if you have a microphone that is ringing, you know, so you can't even give it too much gain before it starts to like, you know, a way that you can deal with that, which is really simple, get out an EQ plugin on that channel of that microphone. We had this happen with an electric guitar, so some microphones aren't as bad with it. I think it depends on what microphone you're using and where it's placed. But you get out that EQ channel, and what you do is you increase the gain on the channel, again, get it just to the point where you can start hearing the ring happen, and then kind of like stop it there, you know, hold the ring. And then what you do is, as it's just ringing, and you got to be careful not to let it get too loud, but you kind of keep it ringing just at the right volume. It's not that hard to do. Take your EQ, get a high bell, you know, like plus 10 decibels, you know, something pretty good, and just sweep it across until you narrow in right on that note that is having a problem. Then turn your Q on that bell filter all the way up till it's the highest Q, which is a really thin bell, and make, you know, go back and forth with that really thin bell until it's right on that note, and you'll hear it amplify. You'll hear it jump in volume. So once you get that, once you find the note, you get right on the note with your bell filter, amplifying it, then just cut it. Just slowly cut back on the volume. And this is what's going to happen, and this is the trick to ringing out your microphones. As the volume of that is decreasing, what will happen a lot of times is a second resonant frequency will pop out. And so then when that happens, take your second bell, go find that second frequency and cut that frequency. And you can do this more than twice. Usually it only takes 2. I usually do 3. just find the note, get a really narrow band, cut the note just until you hear the next note. And then take a band over to that one and cut that one down just until you hear the next note. Just cut out the 3 loudest notes that are resonating in your room, and that's why it's called ringing out your microphone. So what that will mean now is when you turn the gain back down on your microphone so that it's at a normal level, you're not going to even really run a risk of getting those rings. So that's ringing out your microphones. Ringing out your room is a little bit more of a detailed process, but it's pretty similar as well. And just because of the level of detail, I can't cover it completely in this class, but what I wanted to do is give you guys, again, in your note packet, links on how to do this. But here's kind of the basic idea. When you ring out your room, you generate what is called pink noise. And what pink noise is it's an evenly distributed noise of every frequency across the spectrum, all the way from like really low bass all the way up to super high. And it does it at a very pleasant, kind of gently lowering volume. So like what I mean by that is the lower sounds are a little bit louder, and then they kind of slowly taper in volume to the higher sounds being quieter than the lower sounds. Pink noise is a lot more pleasant to the ear than white noise. So let me demonstrate that quick. So I will play some white noise first, and then we'll correct it to pink noise. So this is white noise. See like how harsh that sounds? White noise is an even volume across the whole spectrum, and it is kind of harsh to our ears. Pink noise, on the other hand, see, that's a lot easier on our ears. So what we do is you generate that pink noise, then you're going to use something called an RTA source, and you're going to get a microphone. Behringer makes a great one. I'll put the name of in your packet. That microphone picks up the frequencies very evenly from high to low. So it's a great one to do this test. Your speakers aren't replicating all frequencies evenly because they're cheap. To get a really even sound, you have to get really, really nice speakers. But what you can do is you can compensate. If there's an area where the speaker isn't boosting, like 4,000 hertz, 5,000 hertz, you can bring that up. If there's an area where there's a harshness because there's too much of this one little area of frequency, you can cut that out. The difference between before and after when you do that is noticeable, super noticeable. It really helps cut out a lot of like mud in the lower end, kind of in the area that people sing, in the vocal area. It helps cut that out. A lot of times there's issues there. It also helps everything be clear across the board. So I'll give you those links, and you can then with your team, you can do that. The next thing that I'm going to get into are a couple other basic issues with the room that you can deal with. You might be able to update your speaker placement. That's a big discussion, but if you have speakers that are in the wrong place in the room, that's going to be a dramatic difference than if they're in the right place in the room. For a subwoofer, if you have a subwoofer, if you only have one, because some people have two, the pros recommend 4, but we don't have the money for that. If you have one subwoofer, the best location in most rooms is to put it in the corner. And that's just how the acoustics of the room amplify that bass signal evenly and spread it out across the whole room. So if you can move your sub to the corner, that's going to help your bass response to be even, no matter where you are. You're not going to get these areas of loud bass and areas of soft bass. So that's one thing. You might be able to adjust your speakers, and if you have a professional come in, if you're having a lot of sound issues, have a professional come in and look at your system, because a lot of churches were not installed with the right system for their church. If you have a really echoey building, you're going to need a very direct speaker that just hits the audience without sending sound out, because the sound that goes out is going to bounce around in your echoey space. So if you can get a speaker that's really aimed and focused in on your audience, most of that sound is going to be absorbed by the audience. you actually kind of use your audience as sound absorption. The other thing is your room might need to be treated. A couple things to note: parallel walls are the worst. If you have parallel walls, you're going to have some room resonance problems. And the way that you deal with that is by getting treatment. And again, a professional can recommend that. I could help you with that if you see that as an issue. Just come up and we can talk about, you know, solutions for that. At our church, thankfully, the guy who designed it only included like a small segment of parallel here and parallel on the sides, but everything else, the ceiling, the rest of the walls, the stage walls, are all at angles, which helps to eliminate those problems. We'll talk more about that next week too. So these are going to be things we talk about in a week from now, and they'll be in your homework a few weeks from now, but I wanted to mention them in this video because it's a quick fix, though a little bit more of a pricey fix for the sound in your place. Number 5, and I won't get into this a ton, is booth location. This is hugely important. I've been to churches, first of all, where they have their booth outside of the main room, right? And they're pumping it in on speakers. That can be done if you have a really nice set of speakers in that room, if that room is treated, and if you've worked back and forth, like, I'm going to play something and check it in the auditorium to see if it sounds the same. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you can't hear the way that it's balanced in your auditorium if your booth is in a separate area. So you might have to move your booth. I don't even want to, that's a project. But, so I don't even want to suggest it. But what you want with your booth, you want it to be in a general location where you're getting the speaker. You don't want it to be way off to the side. You want it to be near the center of the room where you're getting the sound from the speakers. You definitely don't want it to be on stage or behind the stage. I don't think most people do that. If you have a balcony and you have your sound team up in the balcony, just note that while you're hearing what the balcony people are hearing, you're probably getting something different than the guys on the floor. So we'll talk about that later as well. Number 6, so we're getting near the end here. Number 6 is, I think, one of the more important things that I've just gone through. It's probably one of the most important things because it's just so central to actually doing sound editing in your board, and that is the way that you set up your board. So here are the things that I would suggest doing right up front, which are very easy. The first one, if you have the option of changing your sample rate or bit rate on your board, it's a very minor, barely noticeable change, but it'll help. You know, again, we're perfectionists. Anything we can do to improve the quality is gonna make an impact once you've done a bunch of things all combined. Bitrate is another issue. I don't think most boards allow you to change bitrate. I would recommend doing 24 if you can, or 32. That's going to be kind of the upper end of quality, and you're not going to be losing anything. If you have digital audio hooked up to your computer, I think you'll especially notice upping your board's sample rate or bit rate, because that digital audio is going to be a very clean sound, and then you're going to hear the nuance in it better. If you're playing cheap audio, you're really not going to tell the difference between 4400 and 4800, at least in my opinion. I don't think you're going to tell the difference. So that's an easy fix. The second one, and again, I'll give you some tips on this in your packet. You want to tie your sub to your mains. And I think most of you probably have that fixed, but if your bass is separate from your mains, I've included some stuff on how to tie the bass to the mains so that it's all coming up and down at the same level. Okay, so it's an easy thing to fix, but it'll improve just keeping your mix the same when you are adjusting the master fader. The next area is kind of the kicker, and this is why I said that this area was really important. We're going to be working on a lot of editing, but as we're editing, it's important that our signal flow in our board is putting things in the right order, where when we edit, it's not going to interfere with other things. Here we're going to get to the main thing I wanted to talk about. I'm going to use the last 10 minutes to delve into this. And I want to give you a good kind of introduction to it here, and kind of give you some templates that you can base, you know, if you're going to change off of the templates, you're at least going to have something. And that is what is called busing. Busing is a process where you reroute a signal. Let's say you have your violin, got your microphone, it comes into your board, and it's in a channel. You can reroute that violin signal into a separate channel where you can do effects. It's a very key part of mixing. In the old consoles, like the analog consoles, the way you would bus is you'd take a small bus cable, plug it into the back, you know, send out the signal, plug it in. And I've actually used that on my digital board because I ran out of buses. So I was like, I'll just make my own bus. I'm gonna go old school with this. First of all, let me just say, every single channel strip has the ability to insert effects onto the channel strip. That is just done in the internal effects processing of that channel strip. So I can show you here, this says dynamics, that's a compressor that's on that channel strip. There's an EQ on that channel strip, and then there's an insert spot where I can insert any kind of plugin that I want into that channel strip. Ours is kind of accessed by pushing this button here. See, I can turn that on and off. So if I want to insert effects on that channel, on my vocal channel, I just come in here, I click insert, and then I go to configuration, which is the second tab in, and there I can choose which insert I want to use. And then that'll send it to whatever I choose in my effects. And in this board we have 8 built-in effects slots that I can put any kind of effects rack I want in. So what you just saw, when I clicked into that, it popped up with this one. So this is the effect that is currently inserted on my microphone. You see my name there? This is a compressor, and it's just doing a light amount of compression on my vocal mic. Every channel strip has that. What we're talking about with busing is if you want to process things either in a group, or if you have run out of effects ability on that channel strip and you still are having problems and you still want to add more effects. One quick word on mix buses, subgroups, and something called VCAs. I just want to clarify with this. When you get into your board and you're watching these videos on how to set up your mix buses, you're going to notice that there's something called VCAs. VCAs are not the same thing as mix buses, but they kind of look like it. VCAs are voltage controlled amplifiers, and what that does, the long and short of it, is it's like a master volume for a group of instruments. So a VCA, also called a DCA, depending on what board you have, VCA, DCA, that is a group where you will assign certain faders. So like on your main board, you'll have a bunch of faders that you choose to be in that, and then that becomes like a master volume that will move all of those faders up and down together. And it doesn't actually move them, but that's what it's doing. When you move that up and down, it's adjusting all of these volumes at an equal rate. So that's what a VCA is. What a mix bus is it's an actual channel strip of its own that you can then input effects on, and you can send that signal out to other places. DCA is just a controller, just a volume control. Whereas, yeah, the mix bus has got all of that other stuff that it does. Let me quickly talk about how you get a channel into a bus using the X32, which is the board that our church has. It's pretty simple. So if I come into here, and let's say I'm going to work with my vocalists, which are these white ones here, which you can't read. Like I said, here's the place where I can insert an effect, but I also might want to send it to a bus. So if you see up here in the right corner, it says sends. If I go there, you'll see that there's 16 sends that are possible on this board. if you'll see here, we've got 16 channels, 16 more channels, 16 more channels, and then the last layer here, these are all buses. There's 16 different buses. So that is what this page here on my microphone is showing. I can send my microphone to any one of these buses. Here's what we're doing with our buses. My first two are my monitors. Then I've got a couple buses I'm not using here, and then here's kind of the main area that we need to look at. Here in buses 5 and 6, I've got my band, then I've got vocal buses here, and I've got guys and girls split, and then I've got drum left and right, a bus where all of my drum inputs are together in one location, so that I can put an effects on all of it combined, not just on the snare or not just on the hi-hat, but on the whole picture combined in this bus. And then here we've got ambience, and all that is I'm kind of saving that channel for if we eventually get mics for our congregation to hear them singing and to have that be part of our recording. I wanted to have that as a its own thing for the future. And then last of all, here you see these are different color and they say effects. Sometimes in the board there's like special buses set aside for effects processing. What you need to know is there's really no difference between a regular bus and an effects return bus in that case. Like if I go up here and I look at it, it looks like just any of the other buses. They look the same. The only difference here is that they've been designated to be any kinds of effects that I'm doing. So as it turns out, I've sent my mic to buses 1 and 2. So we got 2 stage monitors, each has a slightly different mix, but I'm going to both of them. And then over here, 13 and 14, that is a stereo reverb. Stereo is important, right? Because if we're working with a signal that is in stereo, like a band, or maybe we've got our drums and we've got certain parts of our drum set panned one way and certain parts of our drum set panned a different way, we might want to add effects to that drum set as a whole, right? But when we do that, we need to make sure that the effects are stereo effects. Otherwise, it's going to take our signal, which is stereo, which has got stuff panned to either side, and it's going to squish that into a mono signal, which means everything's on top of itself. There's no left and right. It's all coming equally from both speakers, the same signal. So if you look here at our buses one more time, this is the band bus, where I'm going to be, any effects I want to do on the whole band combined are going to be going through this. See how these faders are linked? This is a stereo channel, left and right, and I can insert my effects onto that channel without it being condensed to mono, okay? One thing about that is if you're working on that, you need to make sure those 2 channels are panned left and right, okay? So if you look here, I've got the left channel selected, it's panned 100 degrees, or not degrees, 100% to the left. If I click into the second channel here, you see that one is panned 100% to the right. So my band bus right is panned right, my band bus left is panned left. That is the basics of how we've set up our buses. We've got our monitors, we've got our band vocal effects here, I've got my drums in a bus together, and then these are our effects. So bus 13 and 14 is my reverb for my voices. I might not want to put reverb on my voice, or I might, depending on what song I do. So if I want to, then I just turn up that send on my microphone specifically. I come in here and I turn up that 13-14 send going to the vocal reverb, and that's going to give me extra reverb if I want it in that situation. So the one more thing that I want to talk about here is something called groups. When we send something to a bus, we have 2 options, okay? The first option is we can take the original signal here, so my microphone, and I can send it to my speakers, my left and right, and then I can also send it to a bus where it would be the same signal doubled, and then whatever happens on that bus I'd also send to my speakers. But I don't want to do that because now that would mean I have I've doubled my signal, okay? So as you can see before here, this was unlit, meaning my channel, my microphone is not sending to the speakers. It's not going to the speakers at all. It's only going to these sends. It's going to the monitors and the reverb. And then this right here is called a subgroup. Now, this is the last thing I need to talk about. A subgroup is a send. It's a mix bus, but it's a send where you're just copying that channel in. This subgroup here, number 7 and 8, is bus 7 and 8, and it is the guy's vocal, okay? And so I have sent my signal into that group. So as it turns out, let me just show you one more thing. On our board, on this right-hand side where we have our DCA groups, we can also look at our buses here. So these are buses 1 through 8, buses 9 through 16. If I go into the vocal bus that I was just looking at here, so bus 7 and 8, again, it's the exact same thing as over there, it's just showing up over here. If I select that channel, press this button here called Sends on Fader, it'll show you what's in that group, okay? So even though it's called Guy's Vocal, what you can see is all 4 of my vocalists, my girls and my guys, are currently unmuted going into that bus, into 7 and 8, okay? I could come through here and I could choose, maybe I add a microphone here on channel 3 and I've got a 5th singer. I could unmute that, which would send them also into this bus, because this is the bus that's showing Sends on Fader, okay? So Sends on Fader is a control that allows me to choose what's going into that bus or not going into that bus. So I turn Sends on Fader off. Now you're back to just seeing our normal channels. If I turn Sends on Fader on, you see whatever is going into that channel. So let's say I come over here and choose my monitor, okay? This is not a subgroup, meaning it's volume controlled, okay? It's send controlled. These instruments here, these vocalists and the piano, you can see, and then this one right here, which is my pastor's mic, are coming through monitor 1, are being sent to monitor 1, which again, that's my first bus. Monitor 2 has a different mix here of things getting sent to it. The band left and right, that's a subgroup, so you can see I don't have any volume things sending into that because the volume controls don't work in a subgroup. But you can see that all of my band instruments are currently unmuted going into that group. Vocals, I would have just got my 4 vocalists going into. Here's my next page. My drums, none of these are going into, only my, this is my kick drum, is the only thing going into that at the moment. And then this right here, like I said, is our reverb for our voice. If you come over here, this is not a subgroup, it is a send. And you can see there's a bunch of stuff going into the reverb. I'm using the same reverb on my drums, on my mics, my bass, and on my piano. Now this is the reason why I've done that. If you put a bunch of different reverbs on everything, it's not going to sound uniform, you know? If your voice sounds like you're in a cathedral, but your drums sound like you're in your bathroom shower, it's going to give you a really weird vibe. But if I'm using the same reverb, then everything is going to sound uniform together. So that was a little bit on busing, and I know that might seem like there's a lot there. I'm going to include in your packet, again, specific instructions on like how to do that, how to set that up. I wanted to show you using this board because most of us in this class are using this board, the Behringer X32, so I wanted to show you specifically on that board kind of how that looks. But yeah. So that's a crash course on what buses can do. and kind of how that works. And again, I'll include some more specifics on that so that you can not feel overwhelmed, and stuff that will just guide you through how do I set these up on my board, how do I get the presets correct. A couple areas where you're going to use buses, I think where most people would use buses are, first of all, to get a vocal reverb like I showed you we had on our board. That just really helps with the overall space of the mix. It sounds a lot better with a reverb. Another one is drums. If you have multiple drum mics, we use an electric drum set. So as you could see in my drum group, there was only the kick drum going into that. However, if you have a bunch of different microphones on your drum set, then it would be very good to have a bus where you can do stuff to the drum set like reverb or like compression as a whole, not just on each individual microphone that you might have on that drum set. And then lastly, definitely set up a bus for your band. And as I showed you, we have a bus for our band. We also have a bus for our vocalists. The reason why it's important to separate those and have the band and the vocalist is because what we're going to do eventually is we're going to put compression on the band. And it's going to keep the band kind of like squished a little bit right at the level where you can bring your vocals down on top of that. And the band isn't going to compete with the vocals and get in the way by becoming too loud at different points. So if you have a band bus where you can put a compression on just the band together, that's going to be huge. So again, you'll have some of that in your packet. I'm hoping I can get all of this stuff pulled together that I'm saying is going to be in your packet. I'm kind of pressed on time, but the last thing that I need to mention on number 6 is, as far as organization of your board, is presets. And specifically what I think is important to do is to just learn how your board saves presets. And I think most of you probably know that, but if you have not yet read up on how do I save presets, how do I save my settings, if I get an EQ I like on somebody's microphone, how do I save that EQ into the board? Those things should be pretty easy to find if you have a manual for your soundboard or through a YouTube video. The thing I would recommend for this class is, if you have not yet set up a scene for this class where you're going to be able to take all of your effects off, because what we're going to do starting next class 2 weeks from now is we're going to start building from the ground level all the way up, kind of piece by piece, and you're probably going to want to take those effects off as we start. I would not recommend using that scene in your service this Sunday, but I do think it's good to have that scene saved so that everything that we do in this class is going to have a place to go, and you're gonna have a place to save it. And yeah, so that's the last thing I would say on number 6, is just figure out those how do I save my presets. Number 7, so this is the final one, and this is a very quick one. I would just recommend that as you're doing this, all of this stuff, you guys are in the advanced track. You're going to be the ones probably leading your team, working with figuring out the more detailed nuances of your settings. However, you also have this team around you of people in the basics track, and people who are not even taking this class who are at your church. And I would really recommend, you guys are the leaders in this, if you could bring those guys in and encourage them and give them a chance to mix even on a Sunday or in a practice, kind of constantly be challenging and pushing them and teaching them. Again, that's how we can pass that torch to them. So hopefully, in a nutshell, that has been how to kind of get things set get organized, but also how to kind of deal with some basic problems of noise right off the bat. So homework, we've gotten to the fun part. Again, this isn't required, but I do think it's going to be super helpful to you. So the first thing is everything we just went through, I have written down on a sheet, a sound setup checklist. So my friend Russ, who's been running the sound for you guys in the back, he's going to be passing out that sheet when you guys leave. Or actually, Russ, if you could get up and just like walk around and pass it out as I'm explaining this. This will go in your binder, and it's got a step-by-step walkthrough of everything we talked about, from the stuff that you need to do first, which would be like preset stuff, all the way through to include everything that we talked about. So you're gonna have 2 weeks to do that. That's gonna be kind of the main homework assignment for you guys over the next 2 weeks, is to go through everything we talked about and get that figured out. I'm gonna try to post this video to Facebook so that you guys can go back through it if you need to, but I'll just have to see how viable that is. I don't know if it's too big of a file to post. The next thing for homework is pretty easy, and you guys will be pretty on point with this the first week, but it's just vocab. I've been doing vocab cards in an app that we're going to be using as a class, and so I'm giving those vocab words to the basics track, but I'm also going to be giving them to you guys. And you guys realize this, I think. The importance of vocab is I'm trying to kind of simplify things as I talk. A lot of people who work with soundboards don't do that. They use the technical jargon that even I don't always understand, even though I've been doing this for a long time. Vocab is huge because it allows you to learn and keep up with what you're reading, and it also allows you to communicate if you are working with another sound guy or with another worship leader, and explain what you need. So I've kind of narrowed down a huge list of vocab I found to some of the most essential words, and I would recommend you to be learning those. So I've got 26 vocab words and a page in your binder on how to access the app where I've got those saved, so if you want to use your phone. Then thirdly, I would encourage you, if you guys haven't yet, to get Logic Pro 10 and the book that goes with that. I emailed you guys the information on that. I think it's on Amazon. That book is super helpful. It was super helpful to me as I was learning to mix, because it's very, very easy step by step. Also, Logic is the program, I think, in terms of being cheap, affordable, but also being powerful in what it can do. It's kind of the standard for people who are not professionals, but it's also the standard for a lot of professionals, just because it's amazing at what it can do. I definitely recommend getting Logic. In future weeks, I'm going to be focusing a lot of our homework assignments through Logic, because that's how we're going to be able to record our services and how we're going to be able to edit. So I'd encourage you to get that. It is, again, a little bit of a good cost to that, but it's cheaper than all the other big professional programs out there like Cubase and Ableton and Pro Tools and all of those. Then there will also be a couple videos to watch, just a half an hour, and those videos are going to cover the basics of what we're dealing with in the basics class, which is the physics of sound, and that's going to be very vital to have done by next time we get together, because we're going to be talking about physics, and I don't want you guys to be lost in that. So it's just 30 minutes of video. Then last of all, the basics class is going to be encouraged to be getting onto the Facebook group, which I'm going to kind of narrow down to just people who are in our class. And that Facebook group is going to become like a class forum where we're going to be able to share some stuff. I've encouraged them to be like listening to music, and I've made a playlist on Spotify, like I told you guys in the last hour, but I want them to be sharing some of the music that they like. And I would encourage you guys, if you have time left over, get some songs that you really like that are mixed well in your opinion, and post those, and then engage with the people in Basics on their songs and point out things you like and kind of work with them on those things. So that is it. That's kind of what we're looking at for the next couple weeks.